Thank you. So yeah, first session. You just move the slide forward, please, and we'll just move into effectively, I suppose, a bit of a change here. I suppose in the sense of we'll be looking at Microsoft 365, and we're looking at effectively some of the data-driven services that are available in the product set that you'll probably get value out of as well. So we'll have like a short few points on a slide deck, and today we focus a lot around kind of an on-rails demo to showcase some of the product capability in Microsoft 365 that you may have not seen previously as well. Stuff around actually collecting data, process automation as well, and some areas of Microsoft AI already driving to give you more insight into your data. As I mentioned earlier, we focus very much on Microsoft 365 as like a product stack, and that's our specialist area. So we work with customers around productivity, so Teams, SharePoint, alongside things like Power BI, Power Automate, and other solutions that you'll hear about today. So hopefully give you a good insight, and I can answer any questions at the end as well. Cool. Let's move to the slide. There we go. So effectively, the first point here I thought was an interesting one just to reference in this deck. It was a couple of years ago now that PwC done this effectively report looking at data-driven organizations. And as you would expect, really, they're 3 times more likely to report improvements in decision-making compared to those organizations that are relying less on data. There's a belief, I guess, that sometimes we look at intuition. My gut feel is to go in this direction. Actually, you've got a large amount of data in your organization. It's about using that data to drive your decision-making. On the next slide here, we'll also look at some of the benefits as well. So some of those real core benefits of being confident decisions. If we have the data, we can get insights from it, and we know the right direction to take forward with the firm or the company, and be more proactive to make those decisions as well, whether that be changes in the market or again being led by maybe competitors in that sense, and ultimately looking at cost savings as well. So how can we, especially in the current climate, drive down our costs but actually have more opportunities as well, and using that data that's already in your organization is pretty clear here to drive those benefits. And this was a recent report from the Harvard Business School in 2019. And all of these reports, by the way, are linked at the bottom of the slides after the session. You can read these reports by all means after as well. So if we look at the next slide here, this was a key one I thought were of interest today. Microsoft, one of their data scientists, produced a report of really looking at the 6 steps to become data-driven in your own organization. The first one here is about getting the basics right. So one of the key areas when you move to effectively this new model of being data-driven is making sure that your employees and staff can use these new processes, and actually the data that you're getting from them regarding their processes they're following is good quality data. If we put poor data in, we're going to get pretty much poor outcomes and poor insights. So really a big factor is getting the basics right. And today's session for me, we'll be looking at that point specifically around things like process automation to make the whole thing streamlined. Also about unlocking that data. So if we're having a look at the data in your organization, bringing that data into a single source, be it reports or insights, and unlocking the value that that holds. And of course then managing it, keeping it up to date, removing any data that's no longer required, and the big point around turning those insights into action. So we might see insights, as we'll see today in the demonstrations. A real key point there is also getting a project plan or tasks or people are going to be effectively empowered to turn those insights into action. Another point, and we'll see shortly after, is around employee skill set. So just becoming obviously data-driven and saying we have a new strategy with data-driven tomorrow is going to be a slight problem if your employee skills are not up to speed in the idea of actually getting them using new technologies, ensuring that they know the correct ways of working as well, and spending time with them to talk through that new process about what you want to do as an organization moving forward. And of course, the big point at the end there, gaining competitive advantage. So ultimately, if we can do those points, we certainly can gain competitive advantage as well. On the next slide here, we'll see really, I suppose, a common problem of what we'll call data-driven companies, which ultimately is they start in a point of just making things too big. They effectively go, okay, and put all the data in the company, put it into one large area, and we're going to get lots of insights from them. The problem is really start small, and that also applies to Microsoft 365 in general as well. Always start small, take on one of your business problems, and then use the technology and use this approach to work with. One of the key areas I mentioned earlier around employee upskilling is actually that's a really, if you look at the report here after the session, a key point really is around ensuring that those employees have the skills to effectively use new processes. If they don't, one of the key areas, it's referenced in lots of different reports, is actually these data-driven initiatives will fail if you haven't taken employees on that journey and train them up and look at optimizing processes when you're collecting data as well. So then this slide here is really focusing on, of course, today's point being cost-effective tech solutions. What we're not here to say is there's £1 million solution to fix everything for you. We're actually looking at the word of Microsoft 365, and from that perspective, there are lots of services in there: Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. There's a whole lot. But our focus today is Power BI and Power Automate, and looking at Microsoft AI and how that feeds into those services to drive more efficiencies. So if you haven't heard of these services before, Power BI is Microsoft's effectively reporting and business intelligence service. It's cloud-based. You can bring a wide range of data into Power BI, be it from Excel or databases, or connect to third-party systems and bring that data and also generate insights, as we'll see. And Power Automate is all around the ability to automate business processes, integrate with other systems, and ultimately look to get cost efficiencies based upon automation. And again, we'll be seeing some of that today as well. Cool. So I'm just now going to share my screen, hopefully, no technical issues, and we're going to run through a demo now as well. Just be 1 second, let's just share the screen. Okay, so hopefully you'll all see a screen there with 3 boxes on there.
And
great, okay, cool. So mentioned there's 3 demos here. I think in interest of time, we're going to be covering 2. We do have time, I will cover the 3rd one as well. But the first area we're looking at is all going to be around data insights. That point I made earlier around taking your existing data and transforming it and actually making it usable is a key area of Power BI. And so in this demo, we're going to see what happens if we bring data into Power BI. What type of dashboards can we build? What type of insights can we gather? And how does Microsoft AI help that position as well and give you insights without having to take on a lot of data analysts to actually do that job as well? So I'm just going to go into the first demo here. So we'll start off here, and I've got some sample Microsoft data for today's demo, which is just built on opportunities and some revenue analysis as well. What I've done in Power BI is I've brought that data in, just structured data that really has no meaning in its current form, and we've built some dashboards, very easy to do in Power BI, and we've built some dashboards here. Now, of course, this might look quite familiar if you've used reporting tools before. And Power BI, one of its key benefits, as with other tools, is we can actually begin slicing and dicing the data to find more insights from it. So here I see all of my opportunities, but actually I can begin actually filtering it to look at potentially the central region. You can see in Power BI, it will dynamically start changing data to drive insights as well. So we see our opportunity count come down and so forth. And we might have an interest now, actually, my interest in partner-driven opportunities. So I'm going to go ahead and set partner-driven. And again, you can see how Power BI will change the data in front of me immediately on the screen. That will immediately refresh, and I can export this data into Excel for further reporting as well. What I can do is just return it back. We're still seeing partner-driven opportunities, and I can just dynamically change that experience and do this with all of the graphs within Power BI as well. Now, if we look at another one of my reports, because we have many reports in Power BI, this report is looking at upcoming opportunities by the months. And again, we can do much the same. I have an interest in potentially the large opportunity sizes. So here I get effectively a sliced view of the data. Like again, can filter through, look at specific months and get more insight from my data as well. So you can do this with all the data you bring in. Makes it very good, especially if you're looking at such as legal work. We've built legal reports as well for lots of matter and client management as well to drive reports in that area. One of the key areas though, and one thing that as we worked with clients, we've understood that these graphs and charts are built by a project team. Sometimes they don't fit the mold for everyone in an organization. And that's where Power BI can add more value as well. What we've built here is a data insights page. Now this report page here is totally dynamic. So I've started off with, what is the total revenue by month? And that's something I've typed in, and Power BI has helped me generate that report by guessing what data I need. And here I've got a chart of the revenue by month. But of course, if I go into this report and there is nothing available, Power BI will also suggest data and suggest reports that I have an interest in as well. So here we see effectively the top revenues by region as an example. And again, we can do a query of our data immediately. And with Bing integration with their maps, we also see for the likes of where the regions in the world are that we have most of our revenue from. And this effect is all dynamic. So it allows your wider team to slice and dice the data in any way that they would like to do, rather than having 5 or 6 charts that we assume everyone will love and like as well. So again, if we do the same, what is the revenue by partner driven, we can immediately see all information on here in terms of that report. Now, of course, the data in Power BI has value when we share it. We don't always want data ourselves. We have to share it with other people in the organization to make those strategic decisions and become more data driven. So in the world of Power BI, I can share the report with my colleague. In this sense, I've shared with Nesta. I have this little dialogue here, and I've just added a short note to Nesta to help with next year's planning. What I can do is click on the share button in Power BI, and that would then share a link to Nesta to access this report via the web browser and slice and dice the data in accordance as well. So the power of Power BI there is not just looking at your own view of the world, you can share this with other people in your organization as well. The last point is really important as well. We spoke at Microsoft AI a little when I was mentioning about the demo, and we saw a little of it there, Power BI, kind of suggesting what data I might have an interest in and what it can provide. But actually Power BI can provide its own insights, and it can do that automatically and daily as well. So in this sense, I've already generated this one earlier today. So we've got insights and ready for my report. And when I click on View Insights, this report we see here has been generated by Microsoft AI. The charts, the data, and even the words, it's all been generated by the AI. So in that sense, we can look through our data and find out, again, more insights into the organization. Some of this, of course, being basic test data is not brilliant, but you can see how it can apply to your organization, that you wouldn't need a data analyst to look through your data and find insights. Have Microsoft AI actually go through that and provide these daily insights that you can understand more about your data and take action from as well. So that there was Power BI and using Microsoft AI, which is all around bringing your data in, from your organization into the service, making it accessible, also dynamic, and using Microsoft AI to also drive insights and give you more information from that without having to employ data analysts or have full-time people working through the data to try and help you become more data-driven. The second part of this demonstration, though, is looking at, as I mentioned earlier, how can we get the basics right? So we're all around process automation, we're all around the data being collected. There are certain problems there. If we have an inefficient process, it's going to lead to delays. An inefficient process could mean also that the data we're inputting into our applications is not going to be that strong. Typos, etc., can lead to obviously bad outcomes from your data-driven approach. In this example, we'll be showing an automated approach to invoicing using Power Automate as the workflow tool via Microsoft, and using Microsoft AI to actually do what we call a review of the data and actually pull data from invoices and drive that data collection. So your staff members won't need to do that. That automatically happens as part of the process. Speed up your team and give you good quality data as well. So in this sense, we have in SharePoint, this is at SharePoint, if you may have used this before, we have lots of invoice information that we may have just input manually in the past. It all looks very nicely and structured. But actually this data here has been generated by Microsoft AI. I'll show you how we've done that in this demo here. So on our invoicing information, we have all our invoices from all of our suppliers. What I'll now do is going to send an email just on our kind of on Rails demo that will include an invoice. So here I'm going to draft an email. I've got the message and I've got an attachment. As we'll see, it's a PNG file. So it's a picture file, could be a PDF or a picture. Makes it a little difficult with systems because when you get that information, you're going to have to extract that data, either type it in manually or use other applications to extract that invoice information as well. But I'm going to go ahead and use Microsoft AI to automate that process for me. So I'm going to go ahead and then send this on to effectively the email. Just before I do, I'll show you the invoice too. This is the invoice that we're sending across on the attached email. and this is the invoice data here. And it's a flat picture file, so none of that in theory is machine readable as such at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead, send that email. Now, once I send the email, the process I've shortened. It takes a couple of minutes. But on the other side, if I was sending this on now, and I was saying, well, I was a customer and I was sending it on to myself as potentially the supplier, we could have Microsoft Power Automate, Microsoft AI automatically detach that invoice and check if the supplier is in our supplier database. And if it's not, we can go through a workflow to add that supplier into our invoice database as well. And what we're going to see is exactly that now. This is a new supplier I don't have on my list of suppliers. So we're going to see in the AI toolset do that. So I'm going to go ahead and send the email. Now, what that will then do is it kicks off the workflow in the background, Microsoft AI. Takes a couple of minutes to run. And in this sense, we had a new task generated to me as effectively the person who's handling the invoice now, and saying that a new supplier has sent on an invoice. The system is aware of that because it's using Microsoft AI. The key point of how it's doing that, if we look at some of those supplier details as a link, we will see that that flat picture file we had actually is extracted information from that. So it knows it's come from Fabricant as an example. The supplier status is non-applicable. It's a new supplier. And also it detached the invoice and it reattached it and stored it in SharePoint for compliance and auditing purposes as well. So that invoice is all on the system. So as an approver, as a person that runs that process, I have everything I need in email to make a decision. I have the invoice, I have some of the supplier information. And in this sense, now I could go ahead and approve that supplier and put out on our approved suppliers list. So it might be a procurement team that actually run this part of the process for you. But I can go ahead and then click on submit that I've approved this new supplier. And once I've approved the supplier, we obviously have another problem, which is, well, what about the invoice? You know, we're happy with the supplier. Do we have to start the process again because it's an invoice? And the answer is no. So in this sense, we've accepted the supplier. We now instigate an invoice review. So I'm going to click on submit. And effectively here, as you can see, the supplier has been approved. That's taking part of the workflow process. And now we have the invoice approval. Now, it just missed out the 4 there on my on-Rails demo, but you can see at the bottom here, all the information that was on the invoice has also been collected by the system, and it's stored on the invoice details as well. So it's actually stored that correctly in the application, and all of the information on the invoice is all correctly stored in SharePoint. How that helps, of course, is for your data-driven approach. You don't need to input this yourself. You don't need a team member to write all this in after the event. This is AI taking that information and applying it into SharePoint in a structured way. So here, we're okay with invoice. I've reviewed it, all okay, it can be sent for payment. Now we've seen a process here largely focused on email, which is fine. But of course, we have things like Microsoft Teams now, teams of people with like a common purpose or goal, sometimes of departments and functions in teams. So a big point there is, how can we then integrate this type of solution with Microsoft Teams? And we can do that quite easily with Power Automate. So rather now than send emails out to the accounts team to start payment, in this demonstration, what you'll see in a second is we're actually going to integrate with Microsoft Teams directly, and we will post a message into the Microsoft team for the finance accounts team. So here, this has been automatically posted into Teams, so the finance team can take action with a link to the invoices database as well. This is again showing that the ability of Power Automate isn't just to follow email type processes. We can integrate with Microsoft Teams as well. And if I look at the invoices database, we'll see all the invoice information. The new invoice is collected at the bottom of the screen. And of course, we have this problem where we have lots of data again, but we're after insights, we're after charts and reports. And something that we work with our clients on, of course, is there are some considerations that sometimes Power BI is maybe a step too far. It could be due to costs or just not really needing that type of approach yet to justify the need for a service like that. So we also partner ourselves with another kind of a new setup that actually runs charting tools in SharePoint online. So here we've generated some charts, and this is through SharePoint Online, so not Power BI. But the idea here, it's a more simple tool, but again, from someone who's using this system and wants to drive insights from that invoices data, you can see here we collect all the total number of invoices, the amount that's payable, etc. And all of these graphs and charts you can build without any coding experience. It's all drag and drop to build charts. But again, we're building information from your invoicing table to make it more viable, to drive some insights. And of course, we can do things like filters and filter down on the client name. And here we can see Additum has now been filtered for the data as well. So it's very similar to Power BI, but it's a cost-effective approach if you're not ready to take on Power BI, because it can or does cost £7.50 per user per month in large organizations. Sometimes a consideration of, do we need that? Well, if not, you can look at solutions like this built on SharePoint that can drive your charts and insights as well without having the high cost of Power BI as well. So they were the first two demos. In the interest of time, and there's going to be some questions, effectively I can leave it there. The third one we had was more around the feedback generation and data and using Microsoft AI there. But really some key takeaway points, hopefully you saw from the demos, is really trying to see Microsoft 365 as not just looking at it from an email perspective, that we have 365 and therefore we have like an email provider, or we just store files in there. It's actually thinking of it in a different way and looking at it as a product set with the likes of Power BI and Power Automate and Microsoft AI that can drive your business processes, and also with the data that you collect can drive insights as well within the product set. There's a huge amount of capability in the product there that you may already have available and you may already be paying for as well. It's a key point as part of this. So, why invest tens of thousands of pounds in other solutions if you already have one there and you just have to configure it to meet your needs and requirements? And that's something we're seeing more in the marketplace now with costs, that people are looking at this type of solution and seeing it as more efficient. And of course, a key point, to the probably to the IT people as well on the call, is of course the data you're storing in this service is in the world of Microsoft, not in another vendor elsewhere in the world. So your data is effectively your own, and where that data is stored in the Microsoft service as well.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much,